We have an absolute banger for you this week with everything from new internet-wide crypto payment standards, an HBAR ETF update, AI, a Web3 TradFi revolution, and much more. Welcome back. I'm Brandon, the HBAR Bull, here once again to bring you the latest in the Hedera ecosystem. But as always, none of this is financial advice. Use it for entertainment or educational purposes only. So anybody that has been around crypto for a while knows that the internet has had standards for payments for a long time, but they haven't been able to be leveraged because there hasn't been real native payments designed for the internet. But of course, now that's starting to change. What we're talking about here is the 402 status code that internet developers included in the infrastructure to facilitate native internet payments. Many envision Bitcoin as that native payment layer, but Bitcoin has evolved into a store of value and isn't really well suited for day-to-day online payments. That said, Coinbase is looking to revive the standard to be used with more suitable payment platforms like Hedera to truly revolutionize internet payments. Here's some highlights from over a 2-hour discussion between Jay Kuhl from Hashgraph, Ash from the Hedera Foundation, and Lincoln Murr. He is the product lead for Coinbase AI.
My name is Lincoln. I'm the product lead at the Coinbase Developer Platform's AI initiative. Primarily what I've been working on recently is AgentKit, which is our toolkit for giving every AI agent access to a wallet, and more recently X402, which is our payments protocol for allowing HTTP, internet native stablecoin payments across the internet. We're pretty excited about what this means for AI agents able to interact autonomously and provision and pay for whatever service they want on the internet. So yeah, happy to jam and dive in more a little bit here.
Awesome, man. We'll be covering lots of stuff on X402 today. And I guess, do you want to tell us a bit more about X402? I think that the audience, they're pretty familiar now with agent kits. Obviously, yeah, the tool set that you can give to a large language model so it starts able to have a wallet, send transactions. But what exactly is X402?
Yeah, so the motivation behind X402 is after the release of AgentKit, we were able to get a lot of great insights about where the agent space is going and what some of the gaps were. One of the insights that we had is that value is actually accruing to the data and the services that are provided to agents, but there's really no way for agents to interact with these things natively. So for example, every time you build an AI agent and you want to add a new tool to it, give it a new capability, you have to first find out about that tool. You have to go to that tool's website, sign up for an account, typically fund that account using a credit card to pre-fund your agent's system, whatever it's doing, and then take API keys and pass those to your agent, all before it's ever able to make a call. It's kind of analogous to if you were going into a grocery store and you would have signed up for a loyalty account and buy a gift card before we were ever able to shop. The goal of X402 is to switch that paradigm around such that an agent is able to use its crypto wallet to pay for whatever service it wants on the internet. There's this old HTTP status code called 402. You might be familiar with 200, which means successful, or 404, which means error not found. 402 has been in the spec for decades, but nobody's ever actually implemented, and it means payment required. Mark Andreessen called 402 the original sin of the internet because we had no native way to do value transfer. And we're hoping X402 is the solution to that problem and the absolution of the internet's original sin. I think that's what makes X402 so compelling, is that it is internet native and it's meant to be this open protocol. Like Coinbase is here to support it and help facilitate payment rails across the internet, but we want this to be for everyone to build on. And that's what I think is so amazing about what you all did. Like 24 hours after it came out with primarily base support, we had Hedera support because you guys were able to so seamlessly take that code. And I think you put out a video too on how to convert it to any.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, it was so easy. Like, I don't want to, I did it in the 24 hours, but it was literally just copying, replacing a few words with from base Sepolia to Hedera testnet. And obviously, because you're using all of the sort of the standardized Web3 packages, things like VM, it's like, as long as you're an EVM chain like Hedera and Base are, it's sort of drag and drop, swap in the JSON RPC reader, and you're basically good to go. So I think props to the Coinbase, the CDP team for making that architecture so friendly. Lincoln, can you explain how the X402 payment protocol works in really simple terms? Like if you had to describe it to someone with no technical background, what would you say it does? Why is it useful?
Yeah, so the problem right now on the internet that's been a problem for decades is that there's a million different ways to pay people. You have PayPal, you have Venmo, Stripe, debit cards, various different types of debit cards, and then all sorts of international solutions as well. None of them are instant, none of them are cross-border, and none of them are cheap. X402 is the standard internet native rails to allow anyone to pay anyone on the internet using digital dollars or whatever crypto you want. It's built to be completely open. It's built to allow AI agents to pay each other. And at Coinbase, we believe it'll be the future of the way that the world moves money. And I think where this starts to get really interesting is when you think about agents that can actually go off and discover tools entirely on their own. So it creates this paradigm of dynamic self-improving agents that can go off onto the internet. And in the same way that you search on Google to find a service or a website or some data that you want to access, the agent can say, oh, I need to figure out what the weather is. Go find some sort of endpoint to get that weather information, pay for it entirely on its own, and then use that response to make decisions about whether it books you a trip on a day where there's a hurricane supposed to happen or something like that. So these dynamic agents, I think, are going to be the future of how we see this space start to evolve. And it's all enabled by basically bringing the identification and the payment information to one aggregated source, which happens to be the wallet. And one of the things I'm pretty excited about is this concept of like an unstoppable agent that just uses X402 to provision services across the internet. It just exists on like decentralized infrastructure. It's more of a thought experiment at this point, but I think it is something that's pretty inevitable.
Now, I am planning a more deep dive interview on this, so if you have any questions around these standards, go ahead and drop those down in the comments. But one of the things in those highlights that jumped out to me was they mentioned that this can be any crypto. And I believe that besides stablecoins, HBAR is a perfect candidate for this. So the fee for transferring a stablecoin on Hedera is currently 1/10 of a cent. It's variable on base depending on the network activity on both the layer 1 Ethereum and the layer 2 base itself. But for context, it averages about 0.11 cents, so about the same as what we're seeing on Hedera. HBAR, on the other hand, is 1/10 of that at 1/100th of a cent. This makes it a perfect payment medium for high volume native internet payments enabled by X402. Going back to a point that we've made before, Hedera being the most efficient DLT network on Earth is more than just about environmental efficiency. It makes it a certainty that Hedera can outcompete on fees. So no matter where fees stand on various networks out there, this puts Hedera and HBAR in X402 pole position. I really can't say how excited I am to do a deep dive on this with Jay and Lincoln next week, but in the meantime, I do want to highlight that there's actually two places where Hedera has tremendous potential when it comes to AI. One of them is in this space of inter-agent payments, and the other is in AI governance. Prove AI is working in the latter. As covered last year, the initial Prove AI team was the core team for Casper blockchain, but left that network for Hedera. They made this move to Hedera to focus more on AI, and we reported on that last year, but what we haven't been talking about is what they've been working on since, and we're talking about real-world applications for AI, of course using their tech stack that's built on Hedera, and this next clip we have is a perfect example.
At Grayscale AI, our mission is to improve the quality and ensure the safety of food that makes it to your table. We have an inspection machine that our customers use that inspects the food. We work with some of the world's largest food producers to inspect packaged goods and ensure that there are no foreign contaminants or other quality issues. Foreign contaminants can end up in the food stream in several ways. In some cases, it's introduced or just natively part of the food, such as bones in chicken or rocks that they would be in potatoes. Other times you get foreign contaminants introduced in the food processing facilities, where something like a conveyor belt is damaged or destroyed, and then it ends up in the food stream. Grayscale AI uses artificial intelligence to inspect for a broad set of possible issues. We generate an X-ray image with our machine, and then we use AI models that are trained on large data sets of good examples and then examples of things that contain foreign material or things that have examples of bad seals in the package or the food is missing components. We gather that data through storing those images, uploading them to the cloud, training the AI models, and then deploying those back onto the machine. AI governance matters in this process because we need to ensure that the right model is running on the right machine at the right time for the right product and looking for the right defects. So for example, if we have a machine that could handle small packages and that has a much tighter specification for foreign material, we need to make sure the right model is running so we don't miss things in smaller packages that a customer would expect. Our experience with Prove AI has been wonderful. We worked with their engineering staff to quickly get onboarded with how do we provide the data and a metadata about our data sets and models so that they could be onboarded to the Prove AI platform and then added to the blockchain. My team didn't need to know about all the mechanics. We just worked with Prove AI to understand what the data ingestion format needed to be and provided samples, worked through a short process of iterations with the teams, and then we're onboarded. It was an extremely easy and efficient and well-run process.
So I'm going to keep digging into this because I know that there's a lot more real-world examples of how Prove AI is impacting the AI space. But now we're going to shift gears a little bit. I'm going to give you an update on the HBAR ETF. Last week, it was posted in the Federal Register that the SEC was seeking comment on the approval or disapproval of the Canary Capital HBAR-backed ETF. It said interested persons are invited to submit written data, views, and arguments regarding whether the ETF should be approved or disapproved by July 7th, and in turn, rebuttals to those arguments no later than July 21st. Now, it certainly seems like things are moving in the right direction, but I'm not certain of the full implications of this, so I'm going to try to get some more information from the parties that are directly involved with the ETF application in the days to come. Next up, I want to congratulate Frank Moiti. He is the CEO of Hedera Council member Nairobi Securities Exchange for an article he wrote for the International Banker entitled "Africa's Capital Market Opportunity: Is Tokenization the Secret Key to Unlock Africa's Economic Potential?" To highlight that potential, he explains that the combined African stock market cap is a small fraction of the continent's GDP, which stands at about $3 trillion. For context, the U.S. stock market cap is about 170% of the nominal U.S. GDP. He also mentions that Africa holds 1.1 billion mobile money accounts. That's over half of the world's total. And they saw $1.1 trillion in mobile money transfers in 2024 alone. He believes tokenization is the exact opportunity that Africa's been looking for. He goes on to say, illiquidity plagues many African markets. Small firms struggle to raise capital, bond markets are thin, and secondary trading is limited. Tokenization can break these logjams. In August 2024, the Nairobi Securities Exchange partnered with DeFi Technologies, Valor, and SoFi to explore digital asset exchange traded products, ETPs, in Kenya. This pilot could deepen Kenya's capital market by creating blockchain-based issuances of equities, debt, and funds with near-instant settlement. By lowering minimums and removing geographic barriers, tokenization broadens the investor base. Africa's young, tech-savvy population stands to gain. In Kenya, where mobile subscriptions exceed the population and smartphone penetration is rising, the Nairobi Securities Exchange envisions the Kenya Digital Exchange, KDX, as a fully regulated platform to trade tokenized RWAs. KDX will unlock new investment opportunities, deepen market access, and position Kenya as a trailblazer in tokenization. And just to clarify on this, KDX is planning on building on Hedera. Finally, he highlights that one report called Nigeria and Kenya the top two crypto markets in Africa, driven by peer-to-peer trading and remittances. This aligns with the mobile money revolution. With those 1.1 billion mobile money accounts on the continent, even rural and unbanked Africans have phones and digital wallets. Tokenized assets can integrate seamlessly. When properly harnessed, digital assets can democratize investment, attract fresh capital, and ultimately help finance the region's infrastructure, education, and enterprise. The time is ripe for African leaders to pilot, invest, and partner aggressively, unlocking the continent's latent wealth with the transformation power of tokenization. I can definitely see why the Hashgraph Association is laser focused on Africa in that upcoming hackathon, and I can't wait to learn more about the Hedera-enabled Kenyan Digital Exchange. I'm working closely with Valor to get Frank on as soon as possible. Now let's get a recap of the Hedera Council meeting that took place last week in Washington, D.C. with Shark Bites. Rob, welcome back. How was your trip from D.C. back down under?
Effortless. I flew from DC to Dallas, and then the long haul. I think it was a Dreamliner. It's a 17-hour flight, so it's pretty far. But back safe and sound to the Australian winter. Great to see you.
Great to see you as well. I actually don't mind those really long flights for whatever reason. I just sit there and I just go through the movies and it's over before I know it. But last week you gave us a good, preview of the Hedera Council meeting that you were at in Washington, D.C. I want to get the feedback now. How did that meeting go and what were your takeaways?
It was a great week. There are always good weeks. There's always a lot to discuss. We meet every 6 months. So, there's a lot that goes on within the ecosystem, as you well know. You report on it every week, and there's a lot that needs to be caught up on. Lots of the council members have been, focused in their own particular area, but this gives us the opportunity to give the broad kind of update on what's happening across the entire ecosystem. We have to do lots of business. So we do, the network governance, there are votes. So it's only 2 days. So it's Thursday and Friday, but we met on the Wednesday as well. The leadership team usually meets in advance, and that's the board of directors for Hedera, the Hedera Council rather. And, the leadership team, so the committee chairs, and invited some of the ecosystem partners, senior leadership as well. And, that's like a preparatory meeting to kind of ensure that we're hitting all the right marks during the rest of the week. But we also did a Hyro roundtable. So there's a really good update from the Hyro team on a lot of the progress there, the repos all being open sourced now. So I think that work is now complete. And some of the key HIPs that are coming through. So all the HIPs, the Hedera improvement proposals are now Hyro improvement proposals. So that process is now all comes through Hyro, as it should do. And then the HIPs that are adopted into the Hedera stack, currently all of them have been, then come through TechCom and get voted and approved by the council itself. So that was a really interesting kind of update, I think, for a lot of the council who may not have been as close to the Hyro project as others. And then in the evening, we had a joint networking reception with the Global Blockchain Business Council, GBBC, at the Smithsonian Portrait Gallery, which is just an amazing venue. Yeah, and there's lots of networking to be done. I got a chance to take a walk around. I love art, so I got a chance to take a look around the portraits as well. So that was great. And then we got into the business proper on Thursday. We always look at the network governance, how the committees are operating, or each of the committees. So UseCom, TechCom, CoinCom, and MEMCom, all the chairs presented what they'd been doing over the last 6 months. Some of us had votes to present. So, proposals or recommendations rather from the committees for the council to vote upon. And there was a report from the management team as well. And then we got into some really interesting kind of updates around Hedera 2.0, how that had been progressing, how fast some of those implementations were going, some, that are still to be implemented. And then further to that, we got into, more management reports before going out to having a council dinner that night.
So, Rob, I do want to get into that. You said that you had some of the ecosystem partners come in. I'm curious because I've seen the execution coming from the Hedera Foundation. I'm really happy with what we saw, come out with Vera, with some of the stablecoin infrastructure that's been put in place, some of the things we're seeing come out of ETFs. The only leadership member of that team that I see on a regular basis communicating is Greg Bell. We haven't seen, and I understand this is probably because Charles is back-to-back meetings trying to continue to execute, but you got the opportunity to probably hear him lay out some of his vision, how things are going and so forth. Can you give us any feedback on that?
Yeah, obviously, he was reporting to the council, so I can't give you details, but the general sense was that it's all being implemented according to plan. There are some, any pure Sun Tzu, right? Any battle plan never survives contact with the enemy. And, and when you try and implement a plan and you get into the details, some things don't really work out as previously expected and have to be worked around. But the general themes of Hedera 2.0 are being implemented. Charles was very upbeat In fact, the tone of the entire council week actually was a lot more upbeat, a lot more collegiate, leaning into the future than I'd actually experienced in the last 3 council meetings, in-person council meetings. So it was a much more uplifting and energetic set of meetings through the week. So, I mean, that was an incredibly positive sense, and that was coming from Charles as well. Greg was there. I talked to Greg a lot. I mean, there's a lot going on that front, right? There's an awful lot going on, and that Greg's involved with. So I think that's probably why you see a lot more of him. He's a lot more vocal. But that doesn't mean that the remit under Hedera 2.0 to be a lot more retail focused and isn't being implemented. That's absolutely being followed through on as well.
What are people generally most excited about? And that could be different verticals, that could be AI, or whatever sparked that excitement that you were talking about, that shift in tone that you saw. What were people excited about?
Well, I think it was a lot more about a sense of, even though these are different independent organizations, remember this is the first meeting that we'd had under the new administration, and we were sat there, quite deliberately actually sat there in the seat of US power. There had been some of the leadership team had gone to Capitol Hill, had been, spoken to some of the congressmen. There's clearly some very strong tailwinds with this administration. So that kind of has added to a sense that we're not battling all the time in the Web3 space. And each of the organizations is fulfilling its role now. It's taken a little while for some of them to actually find that role and find their role within the wider ecosystem. But that's now coming together, and with Hyro and with HashSphere and with the foundation under Hedera 2.0 and THA kind of implementing some excellent projects. It's all an ESF as well. We mustn't forget the Exponential Science Foundation. They're all kind of finding their niche and contributing to a whole in a far more collaborative way. So there was a lot of discussion around that. How independently they could contribute to the whole without there being any centralized control. And when we went into the second day. And to answer your question, that there was a sense that although Hedera has this very broad front, as we know, with these native services which can be implemented into all sorts of different use cases, the real themes of this year, and you will have heard this coming out of a lot of the narrative, is around AI and tokenization. So it's the trust layer for AI. And tokenization, which includes stable coins and real world assets and the Guardian tokens. So those things are, the real focal points. So that those are rallying cries that we can all, gather around because they kind of really, really make sense. And they make sense to Hedera as well. And from a governing council perspective, everyone's very keenly involved in how AI is going to both disrupt and enhance their businesses. So, having that convergence of the top of mind emerging tech with a trust layer, which we're all, intimately involved in is a really interesting convergence for every council member in many different ways, depending on their particular use cases. And of course, tokenization with, like I said, with that range of different capabilities kind of fits into all these use cases as well. So, I think that's what we will see coming out of, the next 6 months or so in the enterprise space. And obviously there's a lot of retail end application as well, as we've seen. The AI studio has largely been driven out of retail end innovation and being brought together, which is quite amazing as well. I've been dipping into that a lot. So we discussed all that, and then we had some great presentations. There was a presentation by Vera. So I got to meet the Vera CTO for the first time, and Wes presented quite a lot around tokenization. Serge, who's one of the developer advocates at Hashgraph, who we know and love, presented the asset tokenization studios. So there was a great deal of interest in how those could be applied within our governing council use cases. And then there's a whole AI stream as well, which was super interesting.
Well, talking about AI, and this came out last week. I was really curious around the Equity Lab use case, of course, which is leveraging the chips of NVIDIA and Intel. Who are going to be their first customers? And it seems like one of their first customers or partners is going to be Accenture, which blew my mind. We're talking about a massive company that if it were in the United States, it's in Ireland, but if it were in the United States, it would be number 61 on the Fortune 500 list. What are your thoughts about that just came out, and it came out actually while you were at this meeting?
Yeah, and I spoke to Paul Rapino and Greg specifically about this. I know Accenture very well, having been working in the financial service industry for decades. Accenture have been around providing systems integration and technology consulting for all that time. You said they're out of Ireland, but I think that's a tax positioning. They are a massive international business with huge. I don't know how many tens of thousands of people they have globally.
750,000.
There you go. There you go. 750,000 employees, and they are embedded in every sector, pretty much in every country. It is a massive, massive partnership. So as a go-to-market partner, both for Hedera and for Equity Labs, I don't think it could be bigger. Just short of the big four consulting companies, the EY, Deloitte, KPMG, and PwC, Accenture and IBM kind of are the big technology companies. And of course, we've got IBM on the council, and Accenture now this kind of massive partner driving into the AI space. So they pretty much have the world covered from a client perspective. So now we're kind of strengthening their arm on the AI side. I don't think it could be bigger. I'm super, super excited about what will come out of that.
So let's get back to the council meeting, or at least some of the things that were going on around the council meeting. You mentioned that there was the meeting between, I think it was Charles, Mance, Lehman, Nilmany, and then there were a few lawmakers from the United States there in that meeting as well. I know this is probably a touchy subject, but is there any feedback you can give around that meeting? Anything that those attendees might have said to you that you thought should be passed on to the community, that can be passed on to the community?
No, and I didn't. We didn't get briefed on that. It was, like you say, it was a policymaker meeting, except that that they were there. They were invited. Nilmany arranged the meeting. I'm sure they got down to brass tacks and talking about Hedera, ensuring Hedera was foremost in the congressmen's minds when they were discussing the bills. The Genius bill got through last night, I understand. It got through the Senate. I just saw the headline this morning. So, the stable coins, market structure bill, the Clarity Act, Clarity bill are all really importantly affecting, not only the whole Web3 space, but Hedera specifically. And so for our leadership, or some of our leadership, to have this conversation, to have this discussion, and to be known to these key policymakers is very, very important.
And not to get off the topic of the day here too much, but I did finally wrap my head around. You've mentioned tokenized deposits several times in the past, and I've really started to just wrap my head around the importance of tokenized deposits compared to stable coins, even though I know those lines are going to be blurred a fair amount. I know in weeks to come, we're going to have to talk about that a little bit more deeply.
Yeah, for sure. I see it more as tokenized deposits are more like TradFi. So it's the bank's way of delivering tokens that represent money, programmable money, but they are still a claim on the bank's balance sheet. Whereas stable coins may be bank issued, but don't have to be. And they are a claim against, fiat or other form of stable, but, usually fiat, held in escrow or held in some other way to redeem. So, it's still DeFi versus TradFi, actually, in my mind, is a fairly kind of clear split. What's very interesting for me and what we're looking at is how those things can be swapped or transferred or interchanged at next to zero risk, because every time you introduce a new type of token and you're looking to swap it or exchange it, there is a settlement risk. There's a counterparty risk that's introduced. So what are the rules that apply to that being applied? So we can talk about that, and more exotic ways of having something similar. So when we talk about money market funds being tokenized, actually what we're looking at is a yield bearing form of digital money, and then that gets super interesting.
Absolutely does. Okay, so the last thing around the council meeting that I have to ask, I want to hear about any discussions around native staking. The main thing that I guess frustrated around native staking is we don't know what the reasons why we wouldn't have a little bit higher staking reward. Of course, there's thoughts around the sustainability and things like that, but I think we do have enough in Treasury to allow a little bit higher native staking reward. Are those conversations taking place? And is it just Hedera de minimis dogma that's going on here? Or are there really valid reasons to hold back on native staking rewards becoming a little bit more competitive?
I wouldn't say it's dogma at all. De minimis dogma rolls off the tongue. There were no specifics around that in this particular meeting. That doesn't mean that there won't be in the next meeting in 3 months' time. But it is on the CoinCom goals for this year. So there will be no doubt ongoing conversations about it. I can't say any more than that.
All right, Rob. Well, that's all we have for you today. As always, well covered. We appreciate you giving us some time today. And of course, we appreciate the questions that come in from the community as well. Thanks for coming on, and we'll see you next week.
It's my pleasure, Brandon. See you next week.
Sticking with Rob's neck of the woods, an Australian stablecoin, AUDD, which we covered a few months ago, just officially launched on Hedera. So we've known this was coming for a while, but one of the things that I was impressed with was the amount of coverage this has gotten from outlets including Cointelegraph and Bitcoin.com. David and Darius from FSCO, building the Filipino tokenized deposit PHPX on Hedera, posted on this as well, saying, at DEC Australia, AUDD Digital, and WorldPay Global talking stablecoins both on Hedera. Another point to make, AUDD is also the first production launch of a stablecoin created on Hedera's Stablecoin Studio. Now let's hear why they launched on Hedera directly from the AUDC CEO.
We recognize that some of the use cases and some of the blockchains weren't as efficient or as cost effective to perform certain style of transactions. And they might not have been as fast or scalable. So, when, in particular, if you're talking about large payments, there are many blockchains that can do large payments, and some might take a while, and there might be large associated gas fees, and perhaps they can be absorbed when it comes to, $1 million payment. But when you're talking other payments that are things like microtransactions or high volume, high frequency transactions that occur in the marketplace, you can't afford to have a $10 transaction costing you $25 in gas fees. And so for us, Hedera gives us an opportunity to not only focus on the big end of town and in terms of getting the B2B activities moving on blockchain, but also some of the smaller use cases where cost is everything, and you cannot actually afford to, as a business to offer small transactions unless you have very small fees. And Hedera's blockchain does that very well. Additionally, for us, it was a case of working with a number of use cases in the sustainability and environmental space. And we had been approached by a couple, which I can't quite name yet, I wish I could, but looking to do things in the natural resource area where it needed to align with a blockchain that shared the same type of functionality and vision. And so Hedera also is a very green and efficient blockchain, and it's probably, I think it's rated, the top one in that sort of space. And so that's why we chose to align ourselves with the Hedera blockchain.
I can't wait to see what Rob and Effie have in the hopper when it comes to use cases that are going to be leveraging AUDD. Of course, this is pretty timely considering the passing of the Genius Stablecoin Act here in the United States. One thing that shocked me a bit, though, was that though the Genius Act passing the Senate was assumed, the stock market didn't seem to have it priced in, and Coinbase and Circle saw 16 and 34% rises in their shares on Thursday when it was announced. Now, this is in contrast with the platform tokens on which these stablecoins are actually going to be minting, which kind of languished. That said, this will add more fuel to the fire when the alt market sees good news as good news again, which I think will happen after the alt ETFs start hitting the market in the months to come. Now I want to shift gears a little bit. I want to give a shout out to the NFT project Wild Tigers, who continue to lead the Hedera NFT leaderboards. They're also launching a token and have a heck of a plan around the entire brand. The token Pause is going to launch on SaucerSwap on Monday, June 23rd. I heard rumblings that it's going to be about noonish, but there's no official time as of yet, so if you're interested, pay attention to their socials to keep up to date. I really like the branding around Wild Tigers, the token name, earning your stripes. I just think they're really onto something. Kimchi HBAR also has an NFT mint happening today on Centex. He's one of the most dedicated HBARbarians, exposing Hedera to an entire language and country that happens to be really into crypto. Plus, I've always really admired his art as well. Now let's hop over to a new player in our space that's trying to get Hedera applications in front of a lot more people. There are more Hedera mobile applications hitting the market all the time, and Binary Holdings and VK are trying to help get those in front of some more people. VK, welcome.
Pleasure. Thanks so much, Brendan. Very excited to chat.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's my pleasure to have you on. But to start off, can we just give an overview of what Binary Holdings is?
Perfect. Sure. Very, very quickly, the Binary Holdings, we're a blockchain-powered infrastructure company, and we primarily try and match Web2 legacy businesses with all that's good about Web3 projects. So essentially, we build infrastructure that can sit inside Web2 companies, mainly telcos and banks. And currently, our main use case, I would say, is building utility-driven loyalty programs for telcos. So that's sort of like where we are. We've got about 169 million users as our total addressable market with the app that we have. And on an average, we see about 2 to 3 million daily active users coming in to use our platform.
And they're mainly coming in to use your platform for incentives and coupons and things like that, or is it to play the games and other applications that are on your platform?
So it's a bit of both, right? So essentially what we're building is for a Web2 company, let's say a telco, essentially reimagining how loyalty points works. And I think the great use cases from Web3 is the play to earn, sort of taboo right now, but the play to earn like entire economy that was there, let's say 2020 and 2021. We felt that that's something that's really gels sort of like in the intersection of Web2 companies as well as the target market that we are currently in, which is in Southeast Asia. So Southeast Asia on the whole is a very mobile first, mobile friendly market. And what we saw was there was a gap where traditional loyalty programs were not working because it involved a lot of like inventory buying and management at the telco side, as well as giving deep discounts, which obviously hits their P&L, versus not much utility and like value that the average user saw. So we felt that there was a better solution, which we proposed, and we're doing pretty well in Indonesia and Philippines, which are the two markets we're in currently.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So you said that, play to earn is becoming taboo or has become taboo. I think that's going to change because it only makes sense. You're going to earn points in these games anyway. To give them real value, again, just makes sense to me. And of course, in-game assets, all that kind of stuff. Do you think it's also taboo in Southeast Asia, or is that just something that we've seen here in the United States and Western Europe, or because it seems like there's a lot more people that engage in Southeast Asia in those play to earn games?
I think, yeah. I think I meant that it kind of, at least in the Web3 community, play to earn was a taboo word, but I think from a Web2 user, it's pretty much what they've done all like let's say for the last decade, right? Like they play, they're able to unlock more rewards, which means they spend more time in the game playing. Anything from like Subway Surfers to Candy Crush or anything else that they like, Farmville when Facebook gaming was like big. So it's essentially doubling down on the same user behavior that we're doing. But what we are doing is showing that the return on the time invested can be outside of the app as well within an ecosystem. So let's say in Indonesia, I spend an hour a week playing a game. That return could be in the form of data packs that they are able to redeem from the telco itself. So there's a value add to the telco as well as value add to the user. So we're trying to see what's real world use case that can be built and real world value that we can add by playing a game. It's not just hey, I've played like 300 levels of Candy Crush and I have so and so like things within that ecosystem. It's how we are able to take that value and give it in terms of real world utility for them.
All right, I get it now. So the next thing I want to ask is, which Hedera applications are first going to be available on your app?
Very excited that we're working with Earthlings and the Smack Mosquito game. I think we're very excited about that. So that's coming in, as well as Metaverse Me, which is the avatar game. So those are the two, I'd say, in round one. And then we're looking pretty much to add a lot more from within the Hedera community.
So you've already kind of laid out the kind of applications that might be good for this, but can you just tease that out a little bit, go into a little bit more detail as to what other Hedera applications might be a good fit for this and might want to reach out to you?
Right. So I think if I had to like call it out as black and white, I think we're knowing the sort of audience we're going after. Anything that's hyper casual in terms of gaming or like very social would, I think, be the first port of calling for us, having known the sort of like users that we have. That's in the short term. But in the medium to long term, I think our responsibility squarely lies in being able to show value to the users, one, as well as educating them slightly on more, I guess, complex things like DeFi and anything else and going beyond that. So I think in the short term, phase one would be hyper casual games. Anything that's like very, very social would be number one. And then beyond that, we'll have to take it one step at a time.
Well, I think two that come to mind right away are Legends of the Past. You might want to talk to that team. And Circle of Games is another one that might be a good example.
Yeah. I'll keep my mouth shut, but I think we're already like in conversations with them. Very excited with what they're building. I got a sneak peek with Legends of the Past, and I was like blown by what Basil's building. So very excited. Yeah.
Good stuff. So what are some of the next steps that you're going to be going through that we should keep an eye out for?
There are two things, right? I think we're trying to define what Web 2.5 is looking right now. It's not like in the future, it's not coming sometime. It's really is right now. And we're seeing it day to day with all the metrics and the analytics that we're doing. So from that standpoint, I think on the Web 2 side, we've got another 7 countries that we're opening up in the next quarter. And I think by the end of the year, our idea is to expand our addressable market to about 1 billion users, 1 billion Web 2 users, which we think is like super achievable. So that's sort of like step one there. Step two is going to be increasing our daily active users from 2 to 3 million to about 11 million to 15 million and build that sort of like DAO out. And for that, I think comes to the second part, which is being able to like work with more dApps and SocialFi apps that lend meaning to the platform, and people would be excited to like play and find like utility in.
So, of course, all of these dApps that you're using are using Hedera themselves, but are you planning on using Hedera in any additional ways?
We are actually. I think one of the most exciting things that we've been speaking to the Hedera team is obviously like our telco partnerships and the work that we're doing with the loyalty programs is one thing. But we also have a couple of additional streams that we're working on, which you'll hear about a little more next year, which I think is going to be like pretty well integrated within Hedera to drive value on both sides of the partnership. So I'd say onboarding the dApps and bringing a ton of traffic is what we're excited to do as step one. And beyond that is going to be a lot of other projects that we're like building with Hedera, for Hedera, through Hedera, call it whichever way you want. But I think like it's going to be a the binary Hedera partnership instead of like the binary holdings. I think that's sort of like where we are looking at things moving in the next like 12 to 18 months.
Well, this is very exciting. We appreciate what you're doing for the Hedera ecosystem, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks for having me, and very excited to keep like talking to you about some of the other like really cool stuff that we're building with Hedera in the near future.
Another Hedera team that's hitting on all cylinders is NoviqTech. It's the first public company that I know of that actually holds HBAR on its balance sheet. Well, this week they announced a partnership with Livium, who will be leveraging their Carbon Central platform, which is underpinned by the Hedera network. They're also highlighting that Carbon Central can use existing infrastructure sensors to track and input emissions, energy use, and output in real time. Finally, I want to congratulate John Kikko, coming from Fidelity Digital Assets, for his new role at the Hedera Foundation. He's going to be the new Director of Business Development and is ready to go, citing the fact that the technology is ready, a regulatory framework is imminent, and TradFi FOMO as the reasons for the move to THF. And with that, let's jump into some network analysis and the HBAR market. Network volume is still about the same, time to consensus finality is still at about 2.4 seconds, and network revenue over the past 24 hours was about $1,500. Hourly active accounts has been averaging between 300 and 400. We also saw about 13,000 accounts created in the past 7 days. Looking at the crypto and HBAR markets, Bitcoin is down 1% on the day and 2% on the week to $103,000. HBAR had an even worse week, down 2% on the day and 7% on the week to 14.4 cents. The HBAR market and other layer ones are behaving completely irrationally, in my opinion, with things like Circle and Coinbase getting bids on news that's dependent on the layer ones themselves. Granted, they may be pulling some of the alt capital since there is significant investor overlap. Still, the market isn't making a lot of sense considering the tailwinds for HBAR. Now, I've seen markets behave irrationally many times in the past. Sometimes it just continues, and other times it resolves. I think it's going to be the latter this time around. Once those alt ETFs start hitting the market, I think we're going to have a nice alt season going into the fall. Looking at the chart, we should have some support around this level and much stronger support at about 12 cents. I do want to offer a reminder that the American Sevens Football League is going to have their championship match on Sunday. That's going to be 4 p.m. Eastern. The reason why I'm reminding everybody is because on the Karate Combat app, they are doing an event for that, so you can earn a fair amount more karate if you pick that one right. Looking forward to next week. I'm going to get that interview knocked out with Saucer Swap, hear about all the updates they have going on. I'm also going to get Greg Bell on from the Hedera Foundation to talk a little bit more about that HBAR ETF. We're going to get Lincoln and Jay on to do a deeper dive, like I mentioned earlier in the show, on that X402. We're also going to get Michael Cantor on to talk about the launch of Convey. That's going to have a huge impact on Hedera. If you have any questions on the HBAR economy or the Hedera ecosystem more broadly for Rob and Shark Bites, go ahead and put those down in the comments. That's all we have for now. We'll see you next week.